All right, welcome back to another episode of Dave's R&R Rambles and Reviews. Your host Dave, and today we're going into part 3 of our summer movie series. Part 1 talked about Fast X and Across the Spider-Verse and their abrupt cliffhanger endings. Part 2 talked about No Hard Feelings and Joyride, this summer's raunchy comedies. In this episode, we're going in a pretty big different direction. We're focusing on one movie here today, and the reason that I've wanted to talk about this one, it's become pretty controversial. I think this is going to be the most controversial episode maybe I release. Usually I try to just keep it down the line, talk about all the action and stuff, but this movie, not necessarily the movie itself, but everything that's gone on online about this movie is kind of ticked the box in me, so I've wanted to discuss it here today. Our subject is going to be politics surrounding movies, and our focus for this one is the recently released Sound of Freedom. Sound of Freedom came out, I want to say, a couple weeks ago now, July 4th, by Angel Studio. This movie, it talks about Tim Ballard, who used to be a agent that worked for the government that went on a mission to rescue children from sex traffickers across the globe. And now this movie, it's so hard to rate. I'll start there. I don't even know where to go on a rating scale with this movie because I do think the subject matter is a lot bigger than the actual movie itself. This movie, it does have a pretty grim tone, and it is really eye-opening that sex trafficking is a lot bigger deal than the average person may know. It's something that this movie talked about in detail, and quite frankly may be uncomfortable to the average person. The statistics that they put up at the end of the movie were very mind-opening. Just quickly, I'll go into what I thought about it from a movie perspective. Like I said, I'm not going to give it an out of 10 rating because the message is bigger than the movie. It's a low budget film. You can see that in the movie. The acting's a little cheesy. The whole thing kind of drags towards the end. But these things it was so eye-opening to me to how much of a problem that sex trafficking is among children. It's very terrible. It just was so eye-opening to me. I don't even know how to put it into words. So when I went online to see kind of what other people were saying about this movie afterwards, it was pretty shocking to me. The discussion has turned very, very political surrounding this movie online concerning the actual Tim Ballard and real life, as well as the actor that played him and their political views. I'm not going to get into my thoughts on that. I'm just going to get into the fact that politics have taken such a front seat in everything that goes on in society. And it's not necessarily the worst thing. Politics do need to be talked about. I do kind of feel like, especially the newer generation, maybe, and I'm guilty of this myself, I don't know as much about politics as I would like to. But I just feel like this movie is not the time and a place to talk about politics. It doesn't matter what the actor, in my opinion, his political views are. Even Tim Ballard's opinions don't necessarily get to me. It's none of my concern. You're never going to change someone's political mind. So if that's the way they think politically wise, no matter if you're a Republican, no matter if you're a Democrat, no matter if you fall somewhere in between, it's just how the world works. And honestly, I don't know why the discussion of this movie turned so political. Maybe it's because of their opinions politically, but this movie has zero political agenda. Usually I can tell real quick in movies, if there is a political agenda, if they're taking jabs at one political party or not. But this movie I never felt like it was pushing a political agenda. I never felt like that's what this movie was truly about. This movie truly is about a story. Maybe some of it's kind of exaggerated. I'm not 100% sure. I'm sure it is, like most movies. But this movie, I feel like the sole purpose, the sole intent of this movie was to talk about this issue of sex trafficking across the globe, internationally, especially right here in the States. The numbers and statistics they put up about how much money is in this industry, it's quite sickening. And I don't know where we start as a society to get this issue really resolved. It's just sad that we have to deal with it, and it really broke my heart when I got online after the movie and saw that it's all political talk. No one's talking about the actual context and content of the movie. This movie didn't push a political agenda. It didn't push a religious agenda. It pushed the agenda that something needs to be done about this issue. So, it's terrible to say, but I really just think politics, when it comes to something like this, needs to take a back seat. There's a time and a place for politics, and I don't feel like this movie was that time for at least the comments. The movie, it doesn't do anything politically. I think people need to realize that with this movie. I think most people should go see it. Yeah, it's kind of on the longer end, but really it's just an eye-opening thing that we as a society don't talk about enough. I really wish that people would stop making the discussion of this movie political. Let's turn it into what the movie's supposed to be about. And maybe that sounds hypocritical because I'm spending this whole episode talking about how politics have taken over this discussion, which has taken over the discussion in this episode. So it's kind of just like a full circle thing here, but like I said, movie-wise, it's an okay movie. You're not going into it expecting a huge, big cinematic thing with a bunch of CGI, great, acting, everything. It's really just okay on that end. But I think it's an eye-opening movie experience, and you're going to leave the theater speechless. And it's going to make you leave the theater in a lot of deep thought. And it's just what we need to be talking about here. Give this movie a shot just on the basis of what it stands for, the problems that it discusses. Like I said, it doesn't push a political agenda. Even if it's from Angel Studios, it doesn't even push a religious agenda. I think it's just a good, solid movie experience that can be talked about on a grander scale than it has been. So I think when it comes to politics in the movies, it's okay if movies take political jabs every once in a while. It's okay if a movie even pushes one way politically. And if the movie does that, go ahead and discuss it online. That's okay by me. But politics becomes such a fiery subject when a movie like this that doesn't have an agenda like that is just being talked about politically. We gotta stop, and that's where I'm gonna stop on this episode. Politics in movies. There's a time and a place for it. This episode's kind of leaving me speechless and rambling. Sound of Freedom, check it out just off the basis of what I've said in this episode. Like I said, I'm not going to give it a number rating because the message it portrays is just so much bigger than any movie rating, anything I could say about the acting, action, drama, anything of the movie. Just check it out if you get the chance. Thank you for listening. If this episode makes you want to cancel me because that's my view on the whole thing, do what you have to do. Never tune in again. But if this is your first time listening and you don't agree with it, I'm sorry. It is what it is. That's my opinion. This movie, keep the politics out of it. That's going to be it for this episode, part 3 of Summer Movies. We have a lot more coming up. This summer has been full of movies. Thank you for tuning in. Check out some older episodes if this is your first one. If you've tuned in for a while now, thank you for listening. You can give me a follow on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, at Dave's R&R. We do a little bit of everything. We do movies, we do wrestling, we're going to do some traveling stuff. We go all over the place with it. So tune in. Thank you, and have a great week.